Welcome back, Taurus, to the Taurus Stories. Lately, have you been feeling like life has been testing your heart one last time? The familiar pressures feel a little heavier now. Those late nights sitting alone beneath the soft yellow light, and that quiet feeling that you've been walking for a very long time without quite seeing the door ahead begin to open. But sometimes, Taurus, right before something meaningful begins to shift, life seems to guide us through a few final quiet moments so we can slowly learn how to receive what's trying to enter our lives. And in today's story, we're going to look a little closer at the subtle signs that may have been quietly appearing around you lately. And maybe some part of it will feel strangely familiar to your heart. Maybe the thing that has been exhausting Taurus the most lately isn't some huge life event. Maybe it's simply the feeling of having to stay strong for far too long. The kind of exhaustion that's hard to explain to other people. Because on the outside, everything still seems fine. You still go to work. You still answer messages. You still handle your responsibilities like you always do. But only Taurus truly understands the feeling of walking back into the house after a long day. Placing your keys down on the table, the kitchen light still glowing softly, while something inside you feels strangely quiet. There are nights when you stare at your phone for a long time, reading over an unsent message again and again. Not because you don't know what to say, but because you've grown so used to holding your feelings quietly inside yourself. That's often how Taurus moves through life. When things begin to feel heavy, you don't become loud about it. You don't complain much. You just silently endure a little longer. Another month of waiting, another plan pushed further down the road. Another moment of telling yourself that maybe life will feel easier to breathe through someday. Maybe because Taurus is an earth sign, there's a very particular kind of patience living inside you. Not the impatient kind that wants everything to change overnight, but the kind of strength that can quietly travel very far through pure endurance alone. And still, people sometimes forget that even the strongest hearts can grow tired too, especially when the journey has lasted for too long. Maybe lately, you've started sensing it in very small ways. Sitting in the car a few extra minutes before going inside. The thoughts that arrive after midnight while rain taps softly against the window. The moment you look around your familiar room and suddenly realize an older version of yourself has been living there for far too long. It's not exactly sadness, and it's not hopelessness either. It's more like there's some quiet movement happening deep inside. Something even Taurus doesn't fully know how to name yet. And maybe that's why so many people carrying Taurus energy lately have felt like they're walking through the final stretch of a very long cycle. Not final in some dramatic way. Not the kind of ending where everything falls apart overnight, but more like living in an old house for so long that one day you begin to realize you no longer fully belong there anymore. Old ways of thinking, old ways of surviving, the quiet burdens you once believed you had to carry forever now seem to weigh heavier on your heart than they used to. And the strange thing about Taurus is, you rarely walk away from something too quickly. You tend to stay a long time with the things you once loved deeply. A job, a relationship, a promise, or even an older version of yourself. So sometimes, the hardest thing to release isn't the past itself. It's the feeling that you've invested too much time, too much love, too much of your life into it already. And maybe that's also why this season feels more exhausting than usual. Because part of Taurus may be standing between two very different spaces right now. One side feels familiar, tight and limiting perhaps, but still safe. And the other side carries the quiet feeling that something in your life needs to change. Even if you don't fully know where it's leading yet, that space in between is often very quiet. Like sitting alone in the kitchen late at night, a glass of water still resting on the table, the clock already past midnight, and for the first time in a very long while, you begin asking yourself whether you still want to keep living the same way you always have. Maybe this isn't the easiest season of your life, but sometimes when you look back, the ending of a cycle doesn't arrive with loud noise. It arrives through quiet exhaustion, through the feeling that you no longer have the energy to pretend everything feels okay the way it used to, through the realization that your heart needs a different kind of space to breathe now. And maybe the most confusing part for Taurus at this moment is realizing that you can't walk into a new chapter while carrying the exact same version of yourself anymore. Some things may need to close slowly. Some burdens may not need to be carried forever. And maybe a few doors inside your heart have already been opening very quietly for a long time now. And perhaps this is also the moment when we begin looking deeper into everything Taurus has been silently planting throughout these past years. Because sometimes the powerful blessing Taurus has been waiting for doesn't arrive in the loud or dazzling way people often imagine. It doesn't feel like a giant wave suddenly sweeping in and changing everything overnight. It feels more like walking through the front door after a long day. And for the first time in a very long while, something inside you feels a little lighter, very small, but enough to sense that something in your life may finally be starting to shift. And for some Taurus, that blessing may have something to do with the stability you've been searching for over such a long time. Not instant wealth, not something flashy to show the world, but the feeling of no longer living in a constant state of quiet worry. The moment you look at your bills at the end of the month and your chest doesn't feel as heavy as it used to. The feeling that your work is finally bringing steadiness into your life, instead of just becoming another weight you have to carry. The moment Taurus realizes you no longer have to keep running from the fear of not having enough. And for an earth sign like Taurus, sometimes simply feeling stable again on the inside already feels like a very deep kind of peace. But maybe what's slowly unfolding now has less to do with money and more to do with emotional connection. Not the kind of love that constantly leaves you guessing whether someone truly means what they say. Not the kind that makes you feel like you have to fight to keep someone from leaving. But a presence that allows Taurus to breathe a little easier just by being near it. Someone who understands that your silence is not coldness. It's simply that you've spent too many years holding your emotions quietly inside yourself. Someone who doesn't make you feel like you always have to be strong. Someone who doesn't ask you to prove your worth just to be loved. And maybe, after so many quiet disappointments and hidden wounds, what Taurus has truly been searching for was never a perfect love story. Maybe it was simply the feeling of safety. The feeling that you can finally lower the walls around your heart just a little. Like a long rainy night. And for the first time in years, you no longer have to sit alone with every unspoken thought inside your mind. But sometimes, the greatest blessing of all has nothing to do with money or another person entering your life. Sometimes it begins in the way Taurus slowly starts looking at themselves differently. After years of constantly trying, constantly enduring, constantly being the strong one for everyone else, you begin to realize your value is not measured by how much pain you can survive. And that kind of change is incredibly quiet. No one notices it right away. There's no dramatic moment. Just one ordinary day. Taurus slowly stops blaming themselves so much. You begin to understand that you deserve rest, too. That you deserve love without always having to prove your strength first. That maybe you deserve a softer life after everything you've silently carried for so long. And perhaps the most meaningful part of this season is that whatever may be opening in your life right now doesn't feel like temporary luck. It feels like the result of a very long journey. The days you kept going even when no one saw your effort. The disappointments that could have made you bitter, but somehow didn't. The heartbreaks that once made you want to close your heart forever, and yet you still chose kindness. You still chose hope. Taurus rarely realizes how far they've already come, because you spend so much time focusing on what's still missing, instead of looking back at everything you've quietly nurtured through the years. Like a large tree, spending years growing roots deep beneath the ground. No one sees how many layers of hard earth those roots had to push through, how many storms, how many seasons that felt like nothing was changing at all. And then one day, those same roots become the very thing that allows the tree to remain standing when a new season finally arrives. And maybe Taurus is the same way. Some things unfolding in your life now may not be appearing because of random luck. Maybe they're arriving because for a very long time, you've quietly been learning how to become softer, deeper, steadier with life itself. Maybe Taurus doesn't even fully realize it yet. But part of this blessing may have started growing a long time ago, during the very seasons when you believed you were simply enduring in silence, and before your heart can fully open itself to receive something new. Maybe Taurus first needs to believe that you are worthy of receiving it at all. Because sometimes, the hardest thing for Taurus isn't working hard to reach something. It's allowing yourself to truly receive it. And maybe that sounds strange at first, but many Taurus souls have spent so many years trying to carry everything alone. You get used to holding yourself together under pressure. Used to preparing for the worst case scenario. Used to believing that if you stop being strong for even a moment, everything around you might fall apart. So even when life slowly begins opening the door to something gentler, some part of Taurus still instinctively keeps a distance from it. Not because you don't want happiness, but because your heart has lived in survival mode for far too long. And maybe that's why this season carries the feeling of preparation. Not preparation in some dramatic, life-changing way overnight. More like the way someone quietly rearranges their room after a very long season has finally passed. Some Taurus lately may feel the urge to clean their living space more than usual. Letting go of things they no longer use. Opening the windows a little longer in the early morning. Changing the bed sheets. lighting a small candle in the kitchen late at night. On the surface, these seem like very ordinary things. But sometimes, the way we care for the spaces around us says a lot about the state of our inner world, too. Taurus is deeply connected to the feeling of safety, to stability, to the small things that help the body and mind feel grounded in a world that often feels overwhelming. So maybe lately, part of you has been trying to create a new kind of space for yourself, a place where you can breathe a little easier, sleep a little deeper, move through life a little slower without feeling guilty for it. And sometimes, a large blessing can't fully enter a space that's already overcrowded with old pain. Not just the physical room around you, but the quiet spaces inside your heart too. There are sadnesses you've carried for far too long, old stories still resting somewhere deep inside you, even while you keep telling everyone that you're okay. Disappointments that slowly taught Taurus how to become harder over time. So hard, in fact, that even on the days you feel exhausted, you still tell people you're fine. And little by little, that strength becomes something like armor you've worn for so long that you almost forget what softness feels like anymore. Maybe that's what this season is gently touching now. Not forcing Taurus to completely change, not asking you to become someone else, but quietly asking one simple question. Do you still want to carry everything alone? Because some wounds don't disappear just because time passes. They remain in the way Taurus hesitates with love, in the way you prepare yourself for disappointment before allowing yourself to hope, in the habit of telling yourself that you need to stay strong first and rest later. But sometimes, a heart that always stays guarded has trouble fully feeling the good things trying to move closer to it. Like someone standing in front of an open door, but still afraid to step through it because they've lived inside the old room for too long. And maybe the greatest preparation Taurus needs right now has nothing to do with controlling the future. Maybe it's about learning how to soften toward yourself again, without to rest without feeling guilty for it, allowing yourself to receive help from others, allowing yourself to believe that peace does not always have to be earned through suffering. And that kind of change is usually very small, very human. Maybe it begins with turning your phone off earlier at night, sitting quietly in the kitchen after a long day, writing down the feelings you've held inside for too long. Or maybe it's simply the first honest moment when Taurus finally admits, I'm tired too. And maybe those quiet little moments are already beginning to create space for something new to enter your life. Because sometimes, before a new chapter truly begins, the heart of Taurus simply needs a place peaceful enough to finally believe it no longer has to fight through life alone. And maybe that's why this season isn't only about external changes, but also about the way Taurus is slowly learning to care for their inner world again. Not the kind of change that suddenly transforms your entire life overnight, but small things, very human things, the kind of quiet moments that somehow soften a heart that has been tense for far too long. There are nights when Taurus sits alone in a quiet room, no TV playing, no loud music filling the space, just the slow sound of a fan turning in the dark. And for the first time in a long while, you truly realize how tired you are. Not just tired from work, but the kind of exhaustion that comes from being strong for too long without even noticing it. And sometimes, healing doesn't begin with huge answers. Sometimes it begins the moment Taurus is finally willing to sit quietly with themselves, just for a few minutes, without trying to fix anything, without forcing yourself to stay positive, just breathing a little slower, placing your hand over your chest and realizing there are still so many feelings inside you that have never truly been heard. Maybe that's why small rituals have started to feel more important to Taurus lately. Not because they're magical, not because they instantly change everything overnight, but because they help you reconnect with yourself again. Some Taurus lately may feel drawn to waking up a little earlier in the morning, opening the windows while the world is still quiet, making a warm cup of coffee or tea, and sitting silently while the morning light slowly moves across the room. It sounds simple, but sometimes those very small moments are enough to calm a mind that has been carrying too much for too long. And maybe Taurus needs that right now. Not more pressure to become a better version of yourself, but permission to slow down without explaining yourself to anyone. You may also notice that you want to write more lately, not for anyone else to read, just writing down the things you've held inside for too long, a sadness you never fully named, a disappointment you pretended you had already moved on from, or maybe just the quiet question, what do I actually need right now? Taurus is often better at enduring than expressing. So many old emotions remain buried inside for years, until sometimes even you forget they're still there. And writing them down can feel a little like opening a door that has been closed inside your heart for a very long time. And maybe Taurus also needs more things lately that help the body feel safe and grounded again. A soft blanket after a long day, a familiar scent in the bedroom, the sound of rain outside the window late at night, or a small stone resting quietly in your hand when your thoughts begin to feel too heavy. Many people carrying Taurus energy find comfort in things that feel tangible like that, not necessarily because of superstition, but because Taurus experiences life deeply through the body, through touch, through the physical atmosphere surrounding them. Maybe it's a piece of rose quartz beside the bed, a green aventurine crystal tucked into your pocket during the day, or simply a small candle lit at the end of the night as a quiet reminder to yourself, today was enough. And you know, there's something very special about Taurus that maybe even you don't fully realize sometimes. Even after all the exhaustion you've lived through, your heart still hasn't completely closed itself off. Some part of you still wants to believe in peace, still wants to believe life can become a little gentler than this. And maybe that's why these quiet moments lately have felt so meaningful. Because beneath all the noise of the outside world, Taurus is slowly relearning how to listen to their own intuition again. Not the voice of fear, not the pressure to keep being strong, but the softer voice underneath all of that, the one that quietly knows what is truly exhausting your heart and what is slowly bringing it back to life again. And if the energy of this season could be wrapped into one small message, maybe it would feel like an oracle card gently placed on the table in the middle of a quiet midnight room. You no longer have to carry everything alone just to prove your worth. And maybe that's the message Taurus has needed to hear for a very long time. Because after years of only knowing how to push through and endure, the deepest part of your heart may no longer be searching for some massive miracle anymore. Maybe it's simply longing for a place, a feeling, or even a softer version of yourself that finally allows your soul to unclench a little after such a long journey. And maybe that's also the moment when Taurus begins to understand that what you truly need in the next chapter of your life isn't only a change in circumstances, but learning how to stay present with peace when it finally begins to enter your life. Because after everything Taurus has been through, maybe what you're searching for now is no longer the feeling of needing to run faster just to prove something. Maybe it's simply the feeling of finally living in rhythm with your own heart. Waking up in the morning without that heaviness sitting in your chest. Coming home after a long day without feeling like you still have to keep fighting through the night. There are people who look at Taurus and assume you're always strong. And honestly, you usually are. But very few people ever see how many years you've quietly spent teaching yourself how to stand back up every time life didn't unfold the way you hoped it would. So many disappointments, and somehow you still kept believing in something better. So many lonely seasons, and somehow you still tried to keep your heart kind. So many nights lying awake in the dark, telling yourself softly, tomorrow will feel easier. And maybe that's exactly why. If some kind of blessing is slowly finding its way into your life now, it doesn't feel random. It feels more like something your heart has been slowly walking toward for a very long time. Not everyone has the patience to move slowly through life without giving up. Not everyone can remain gentle after repeated disappointment. But Taurus kept trying in your own quiet way. Maybe not perfectly. Maybe there were many moments when you almost gave up completely. But you're still here, still living, still hoping in quiet ways, still carrying that small inner wish that maybe one day life could feel a little lighter than this. And maybe that's one of the most beautiful things about Taurus. Not because you're always strong, but because even after your most exhausting seasons, your heart still hasn't fully closed itself off from life. So if lately Taurus feels like something inside is beginning to shift, maybe allow yourself to slow down long enough to listen to it. You don't need all the answers immediately. You don't need to know exactly what the next chapter is supposed to look like. Sometimes, simply feeling your heart changing is already enough. Maybe it's the desire to care for yourself more gently than before, to spend time around people who bring you peace instead of pressure, to finally set down a few burdens that were never truly yours to carry forever. And those changes are usually very small. But sometimes the smallest changes quietly guide Taurus toward a completely different life over time. And if somehow you happen to hear this tonight, sitting alone in a familiar room or driving home after a long day, then maybe I just want to remind Taurus of one very gentle thing. You no longer have to keep proving your worth through endless endurance. You can still be strong without abandoning your own emotions. You can still be dependable without carrying the entire world by yourself. And sometimes the most beautiful thing a Taurus heart can do for itself is finally allowing itself to believe that it deserves the same peace it has always tried so hard to give to everyone else. And if some part of today's story felt familiar to you,
Leave a small comment below.
maybe something as simple as,
I'm ready to receive.
Not as a promise to the future, but maybe as a quiet way for Taurus to admit to themselves that after everything they've been through, their heart still wants to open one more time. And if you'd like to continue sharing these stories together, don't forget to like and subscribe to the Taurus Stories, because somewhere out there are probably many other Taurus souls just like you, people who are carrying far more strength than the world ever truly sees. Thank you for staying with me through tonight's story, sending Taurus so much peace, so many gentle breaths after long days, and so much light for the road ahead. And I'll see you again very soon in another story here on the Taurus Stories.